All right, Kyle Shanahan just spoke, press conference on Monday, and he went through some of the 49ers injuries. And I don't think there's terrible news anywhere here across the board. People might be alarmed when they see Brock Purdy's name on the list that Kyle Shanahan released, but he said it's shoulder soreness, came from a hit in the game, not from throwing the football, and that he's going to be day to day this week. So I would not sound any alarm bells on Brock Purdy at this point. Remember, in the NFL, if there is an injury situation, somebody is a little bit sore when they come in on Monday, you have to list it. So the 49ers have listed it. Shanahan also said that Nick Bosa has got a shot to play on Sunday against the Packers. He's going to be evaluated over the course of this week. Obviously, didn't look good yesterday when he did have to exit the game with the opposite oblique injury, right? First, it was the hip pointer on one side. Then he overcompensated on his second sack, led to an oblique injury on the other side. And from that point on, Nick Bosa was unable to stay in the game, hobbled off the field. Shanahan didn't say that he felt better today, but they're going to evaluate it this week. They didn't firmly rule Nick Bosa out. They didn't say that this is a week-to-week thing. And, you know, we saw Bosa really labor to the finish line of that game against Tampa Bay. And then obviously he rested through practice, at least on Wednesday and Thursday last week, and got into a shape where he was able to play well against the Seattle Seahawks. He had 2 sacks and a whole lot of pressure. He was beating both Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross, both tackles against the Seattle Seahawks over 2+ quarters. Obviously, we saw the 2 sacks, but unfortunately, he got hurt on the second sack. Anyway, if they use the same formula of rest this week, I don't think it's out of the question for Nick Bosa to be ready to play against the Green Bay Packers in a game that might be a must-win for the 49ers. It's impossible to say if it's a must-win at this point because you don't know what's going to happen moving forward. But when you take a look at 2021, for example, when the 49ers had to make a late charge and they barely squeaked into the playoffs, so that win in Week 18 over the Rams, tiebreakers and all that kind of stuff were being talked about then. And the divisional record and the NFC record, the intra-conference record, ended up being really important. So the 49ers are 1-3 in NFC West play, which is not good at all following this loss to the Seattle Seahawks. Next week, they've got a chance to add an NFC win or a chance to add an NFC loss. And you can tell that the delta between the two could potentially be really damaging when all is said and done, even if they go on a win streak after the Packers game. If they can't win this next one, boy, they're not going to be sitting very pretty in the tiebreaker realm. And because of that, this is extremely important. And because of that, I think Nick Bosa is going to do whatever he can to play on Sunday. Somebody like George Kittle is going to do whatever he can to play on Sunday. He's going to be back out at practice, expected back out at practice on Wednesday. And based on what I've gathered, George Kittle's hamstring is at a place where the 49ers have to be careful. You don't want to aggravate something to keep him out for the rest of the season. This wasn't quite a playoff game yesterday. It was obviously extremely important, but it wasn't the type of game where you want to roll the dice. So they gave Kittle a little extra rest. And I think that moving forward into the Green Bay game, the hope is that they're now out of that territory with George Kittle, that they will be able to play him. And even if there is still a little bit of a question, this game now, obviously, because of the loss to the Seattle Seahawks, takes on some added importance. A little bit more on Kittle in a bit. I've got some criticism for the way that Kyle Shanahan handled the lack of his star tight end in this game against the Seattle Seahawks. I think that he played way too much according to scheme instead of available talent, and I'll explain that in a couple minutes. There is some news here, though. Charvarius Ward has officially rejoined the 49ers following bereavement leave. His daughter, Amani Joy, tragically passed away. She was only 1 year old. So the 49ers told Charvarius Ward, take as much time as you need. Obviously, the right approach. John Lynch and several members of the organization headed to Amani Joy's funeral in Dallas, which was the Friday before the game at Tampa Bay. And now Mooney Ward is indeed back with the team, and he's expected to be back in uniform for San Francisco on Sunday when they take on Jordan Love and the Packers. A lot of good wide receivers on that Green Bay team. So that could be a boost for the 49ers, getting Charvarius Ward back into the building. I am looking to make sure that I've gone through all of the injuries. Oh, Jacob Cowing. Jacob Cowing is in the concussion protocol for the 49ers this week. And they hope to open Dre Greenlaw's practice window next week. So that's not happening yet this week. It's going to happen next week. We've talked about this with Tim Kawakami. He's the one that initially had this guess. I agree with it. The 49ers' last artificial turf game of the regular season is at Buffalo on December 1st. I don't think it makes sense to bring Dre Greenlaw back before then, coming off an Achilles injury in February. That happened in the Super Bowl. I think it makes a whole lot more sense to bring Dre Greenlaw back the following week. That'd be a home game against the Chicago Bears on December 8th. I am just connecting the dots, reading the tea leaves, whatever you want to say. I'm looking at that as the 49ers plan. I don't have any inside information as far as that goes, but Tim Kawakami, smart guy, that's what he deduced, and I think I agree with him when I look to see how the 49ers have treated artificial turf games, how they've treated returns from injury, and that has definitely been built around the schedule and natural grass versus artificial turf. So Dre Greenlaw's practice window under this plan, Kyle Shanahan said that they hope to have him back next week at practice, would open right after they play the Green Bay Packers. That'd give him a full week ahead of the Buffalo game. I wouldn't expect them to activate him for Buffalo, but I could be wrong. If they don't, as I would expect, then he would get another full week before the 49ers played the Chicago Bears. That'd be 2 out of the 3 weeks. They used 2 weeks in Yetur Gross-Matos' practice window before activating him. It seems to all line up well for the 49ers so to come back for that game against the Chicago Bears. But for now, all we know is the 49ers hope to open up Dre Greenlaw's practice window next week. Shanahan today, I thought the most notable quote came here. He said that we're pissed off from yesterday. Somebody asked him what the mood is like in the building. Obviously, the 49ers are peeved. I get it. Their fans are also very upset. I mean, we got people bordering on hysteria now. 49ers have to put their head down and continue working. They are 5-5, and based on Mike's monitoring of social media, since I'm not taking as close of a look at it, there's a lot of fire Shanahan talk, and I have to come out and say that the fire Shanahan talk is neither serious nor objective. If your reaction to what has happened this year is fire Shanahan, you are either being overly emotional or you are grandstanding, period. Because the 49ers are 5-5. This is not a 2-8 team. This is not a 1-9 team. It's not a 3-7 team. It's a 5-5 team that has had a rough go of it this year. I've been very, very objectively critical of Kyle Shanahan over this season, and especially over the course of the past 24 hours. In fact, I wrote a whole article about the problems that the 49ers have, which I think are rooted in Kyle Shanahan's play calling right now. I don't think he's got his best stuff. I don't think he has his fastball, but I do think that he should have every opportunity to regain his stuff because the 49ers have been through similar struggles before. But, you know, anybody going and turning this into something greater than it is just doesn't have a sense of what the NFL is like or what the league is like. There are a lot of teams that have it much worse than the 49ers. There are a ton of teams that have it almost exactly the same as the 49ers. And there are a few teams that have it a little bit better than the 49ers right now. And the 49ers need to graduate from the slog that they're in and move forward into the next realm, which they've already done in previous seasons. Their backs are obviously up against the wall. There's a whole lot to fix. I think it starts with Shanahan himself needing to be better. But if we're going to have a serious football discussion about strategy, we can't be talking like children about wanting to fire the coach after every single loss and then wanting to name him the coach of the year after every single win. I mean, the variation between moods every single week in and week out is absolutely insane. And it does not lead to productive discussion at all. A little bit more on that in a second, but first looking forward, the 49ers are 1.5 point underdogs against Green Bay. So basically this is a toss-up. That's what Vegas says coming up. I think that any rational observer would agree. These are two relatively evenly matched teams. Obviously, the Packers have the home field advantage in this game at Lambeau Field. So the 49ers are at 5-5. They're right in a cluster. The NFC West is what, 3 5-5 teams and 1 6-4 team. So they're very much still in the division race. I saw ESPN FPI gave the 49ers a 27% chance to make the playoffs. So it's still, we're not dealing with like 5% probability here. They're obviously pushed up against the wall. This is back against the wall, heading to Green Bay, heading to Buffalo. If you want to objectively criticize and discuss what the 49ers can do next to turn stuff around, this is the best time to do it, because they're going to have to be sharp heading to the road. They're going to have to fix the penalties that happened yesterday. They're going to have to scheme more space. I think Shanahan does have to rediscover some of his stuff. What I talked about in the article on the San Francisco Standard, I think is a huge, huge deal. We scroll down here, take a look at this. These are the average yards of separation at the time of the catch. The 5 worst NFL teams in this regard. Maybe I could zoom in a little bit. There we go. Yeah, bigger text is better. So these are yards of separation at the time of catch over the first 11 weeks of the season. You could see 4 very bad teams and the 49ers, who are obviously a mediocre team at 5-5 right now. Number 32, the 49ers, dead last. They're averaging only 3 yards of separation at the time of catch. The Cowboys, not having a good year, 3 yards of separation at the time of catch. The Giants, that's ugly. They just benched Daniel Jones for Tommy DeVito, right? That's 3.3 yards per catch. Almost said Danny DeVito, but it's Tommy DeVito. The Tennessee Titans, 3.3 yards per catch. That's a dumpster fire. The Carolina Panthers, we know how terrible they've been. Bryce Young, Andy Dalton. I don't even know who's playing quarterback for them right now. That's 3.3 yards of separation at the time of the catch. The 49ers simply are not operating with enough room offensively. And that comes back to Kyle Shanahan. That's the guy that's drawing up these passing plays. The 49ers have seen a big-time brain drain over recent years because of the success that they have enjoyed as an offense. So, for example, somebody who was a pass game specialist for the 49ers last year, Clint Kubiak, he's now the offensive coordinator of the Saints. They've lost a lot of other valuable coaches in different regards of the game. Anthony Lynn worked a lot on the 49ers run game, but you can go down the list over the past several years, from Mike McDaniel to somebody like Kubiak. Shanahan has lost some of his trusted lieutenants, and Shanahan is struggling, I think, to bring this offense back to the level of potency that it was at before. Because when we watched this game yesterday, the 49ers got some superstar plays. Brock Purdy was scrambling for his life. And again, I remember the one pump fake on 3rd and 7 where he darted out of the backfield. I have a great visual from that play. This was a first down, but it also was a play that was highlighted by the severe lack of separation that I think has become absolutely emblematic of the 49ers season. Look at this. This is just a screenshot from this game yesterday. This is 3rd and 7. And this is what Brock Purdy is looking at. I'm not going to play the video because we're not going to get copyrighted here. This belongs to Fox, so we could play the still shot. But Brock Purdy is looking at 1 eligible, 2 eligibles, 3 eligibles, 4 eligibles, 5 eligibles over here with Eric Saubert, all of whom are covered with extra defenders back waiting. There's 7 defenders back. So there's somebody on every single eligible, with somebody here and a deep safety over there. So there's nowhere for Brock Purdy to throw. And this happened several times over the course of the game. He miraculously turned this into a first down. He bolted to the left side. He had to run about 30 yards to do it. His pump fake was able to keep the safety at bay. The safety bit on the pump fake, and then Brock Purdy sprinted by him for the first down to the left side. But between a play like this, between the touchdown run with a dive to the pylon, and then the Jawan Jennings Superman plays, the 49ers had to work so hard to accomplish anything of value offensively yesterday. And it all really matched with what we've seen from this team statistically, in that the catch point separation numbers just aren't good. So the solution is that Kyle Shanahan needs to rediscover the fastball that allows for offensive cohesion. And he's got to do it without Clint Kubiak on staff, without Anthony Lynn on staff. I know Mike McDaniel left several years ago, but he's got to do it with the guys that he currently has in the building. The 49ers have to sit down midstream here and figure out what's going wrong beyond just the penalties. I get it that they penalized themselves yesterday and that hurt the run game. And I get that there was some missed blocking assignments up front in the run game in particular that contributed to the stalling of some of these drives. But the one thing the 49ers absolutely must fix is the pass game that sets up the run game. And there have to be better options for Brock Purdy downfield. Guys have to be more open. I talked about the George Kittle return for the 49ers, which should be happening this week. I don't think that Shanahan handled his absence efficiently yesterday. Jalen Moore played 12 snaps for the 49ers at tight end. Jalen Moore is an offensive lineman. So what the 49ers did, because they were missing George Kittle, who's such a good run blocker, was that they said, well, we got to make up for this. So we need to, let's put in an lineman to block for George Kittle, because none of our other tight ends are good enough to replicate George Kittle's impact as a run blocker. So they put in an actual offensive lineman in Jalen Moore to block. 12 snaps at tight end for Jalen Moore. The problem is that George Kittle is a singular player. He's a future Hall of Famer. And much of what makes George Kittle so effective as a blocker is the fact that defenses aren't sure if he's going to be blocking. He can run out there for a pass pattern as well. George Kittle is a wide receiver one type of talent in the receiving game. Jalen Moore is not a wide receiver one type of talent in the receiving game. So by trying to replace George Kittle with Jalen Moore for in 12 snaps of the game, that's a big load of snaps in the game. What you are doing is you're saying that you are so committed to trying to maintain the same flow of rushing success that you will sacrifice passing potential and explosiveness to do it, because Moore is obviously not going to give you what Kittle is giving. And to me, I think that really just handcuffs the 49ers offense. This is a 3rd and 7 play, so that this is not a play that this is directly applicable to, but you're going to struggle to generate separation against a team that covers well. The Seattle Seahawks cover well. You're going to struggle to generate separation if you're putting a 6th body on the field that is not a specialist in terms of running routes. And when you don't have George Kittle and you put Jalen Moore there instead, that is exactly what you're doing. My advice would have been, and this is my criticism, would have been for the 49ers to just lean into what they actually have. You may not have George Kittle, and you might not trust Braden Willis or Jake Tonjes. You put Eric Saubert in the game, but he was sick yesterday. I don't think that helped matters either. But fine, you don't trust what you have at the tight end position. Go more receiver heavy in that game. It's fine. Lean more into Jacob Cowing. Lean more into expanded wide receiver sets. Use the personnel that you have at your disposal if you're Kyle Shanahan, because to me, the game is a talent-driven operation. It is not a schematically driven operation. But both talent and scheme are both important, but the locomotive of the train is the talent. The scheme should not be the locomotive of the train, especially on a team that has as much talent as the 49ers. And even without Kittle, even without Brandon Ayuk, they still had a lot of talent in that receiving room to be able to run this by talent, not run this by scheme. Don't keep on trying to replicate what you were doing running-wise, even without the players who made that run scheme possible. And George Kittle is, again, a future Hall of Famer, so he makes exceptional things possible. And I don't think that the 49ers were able to replicate the same with Jalen Moore. So, I mean, that's just one example. That's my take on what the 49ers were doing wrong offensively in this game yesterday. I think that moving forward, we have to remember that this staff does have a track record of figuring it out. Now, Shanahan is the head of the staff, and he's lost trusted lieutenants over the years due to the brain drain. So the challenge is different every single season. But the track record of finding offensive cohesion has been there. And it's even more clear than ever, I think, after yesterday, that the 49ers have the quarterback to do it. Brock Purdy has continually hung in there and delivered big plays when the 49ers have given him at least a smidge of opportunity to deliver those big plays. There was one exception yesterday, and it was a chance to seal the game. It was the crosser for Deebo Samuel, and Purdy missed that one. Quarterbacks are going to miss throws. That's why you have to give them opportunities for gimmies. Even if it's Tom Brady, even if it's Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, there has to be something schemed open at a regular occurrence over the course of a game so that you're not relying on walking on a tightrope throughout the whole game. The 49ers were walking on a tightrope offensively yesterday. Every single third and long that came up seemed that it had to be threaded through an absolute narrow window with Juwan Jennings carrying defenders for 4 yards and some kind of miracle like that happening for the 49ers to convert. And that just, it's not a sustainable way to live. If you play with fire for long enough, eventually you're going to get burnt. And that's what happened for the 49ers yesterday. So the schematics of this have to be more sustainably good. There has to be more sustainable space created. This right here has to be solved. The 49ers have to move out of the league cellar in this statistic. And that is a reflection of how Shanahan is calling the game. And it's a reflection of how Shanahan and Purdy are melding their talents together. It's about the play caller quarterback cohesion on top. Now, there are some cool things in 49ers history that we should talk about. The 1988 49ers, and some of the older fans here will know this very well, but the 1988 49ers, who won the franchise's third Super Bowl, were actually 6-5 at around this point of the season. And to drop to 6-5, the 49ers scored 3 points at home in a 9-3 loss to the Los Angeles Raiders. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this was an exhibition of how to turn an offense around late in the season. Because the 49ers, in the 2 weeks after that game against the Raiders, where they managed only 3 points at home at Candlestick Park, the 49ers turned around and scored 37 against Washington the next week, and then 48 against San Diego the week after that. So imagine scoring only 3 at home with Joe Montana, and then turning around and going for 37 and 48 in the 2 weeks after. That was the year where Bill Walsh was so stressed out that he retired at the end of it. But it seemed that Bill Walsh had definitely lost his fastball over the course of that regular season, especially the early part of it. There were games, the 49ers lost in the overtime game to the Broncos that year, where they scored only 13 points. They lost the game to the Chicago Bears that year, where they scored only 9 points. Early in the season, they lost the game to the Falcons, where they scored only 17 points. Remember, they scored only 17 yesterday. And obviously, that was an ultra-talented Super Bowl team. So it had several poor offensive showings. There was actually a yo-yoing between Joe Montana and Joe Montana and Steve Young at quarterback that year. But the absolute low point came against the Raiders in week 11. And the 49ers, again, they lost that 9-3. Fun fact, Mike Shanahan, Kyle's dad, was the head coach of the Raiders in that game at Candlestick. So the 49ers went from everybody writing them off. They were 6-5. Everybody was writing them off, to ripping off 4 straight wins to push into the playoffs. And those wins, that scoring output in the first 2 of those wins was 37 and 48 points. So they went from inept to absolutely dominant. This is why you should never write a talented team off in the NFL, because this kind of stuff happens. This is not the first time that it happened. That wasn't the last time that it's happened, but it's the most relevant example I can give you because mostly 49ers fans are watching this, and I should remind you of historical context. Jesse Sapolo talks about it a lot. He said everybody counted the 49ers out when they were 6-5 at that time. So the 49ers are 5-5 now, and now they've got to move to 6-5 with a win against Green Bay. If they drop to 5-6, I think we're entering uncharted territory. I don't know if I can find a 5-6 49ers team that has been able to turn it around and take it the distance, because that hasn't happened. But we've seen in the Shanahan era, we've seen a 3-5 team turn it around. We've seen a 3-4 team turn it around. I'm talking 2021, 2022. This year, they obviously started 3-4. Now they're 5-5, and we'll see what the next step is for the 49ers. That's just simple historical context. And in a league that is so dominated with parity, you absolutely have to let things play out before you make completely knee-jerk, emotional, overreactions about how things go. I think that the 49ers offense under Kyle Shanahan this season has obviously shown those glimpses of promise, and even entire games worth we saw in Seattle when they scored 36 points earlier this season. But they have, again, they've been so reliant on superstar performances, and normally it's been Brock Purdy bailing them out. We've seen a lot of Jawan Jennings bailouts. They need to get to a point where they're executing things with more ease, and that falls back on the play caller, on the head coach. He's got to be scheming some guys open, so it's not Purdy having to put on his Superman cape every single time. Yeah, Shanahan today even said that Christian McCaffrey has looked good, that he just didn't have room to bust out a big run. And I think if obviously that's an indictment on some level of the 49ers blocking up front on the offensive line. But I think that's Shanahan also taking some ownership himself, saying, yeah, Shanahan has to scheme the room for Christian McCaffrey. The best example I can use of the 49ers being a step behind right now when it comes to the play calling chess match are the sweeps and the end arounds. Deebo Samuel, as a rookie, averaged 11.4 yards per carry. As recently as last year, he was at about 5 or 6 yards per carry. This year, he's at 2.9 yards per carry. That is a career low by far for Deebo Samuel, 2.9 yards per carry. So anytime that the 49ers try to run to the perimeter, what used to be a tremendously efficient proposition has turned into something where it feels like they're lucky to break the line of scrimmage and get a yard. And that means the defenses right now are a step ahead of them, and the 49ers are having to strain. They're like in this arm wrestling match where, yeah, they're strong because they've got a lot of talent, and occasionally they'll win that arm wrestling match or get an advantage in it, but they're having to work way too hard to win it. And when this offense is operating with Kyle Shanahan at full cylinders, when he's in his bag play calling wise, it's not that hard. You watch it and it's easy. And I haven't gotten that feeling of ease since, even the Cowboys game seemed like a little bit of a grind for the 49ers with some of those penalties in the first half. The game against the Seahawks, there might have been some ease for the 49ers. I'm going to go to the full game log here for San Francisco. I'll go back. We'll do the easy meter for the 49ers this year. The Jets game was a slog. They kicked 6 field goals in that game. The Vikings game obviously wasn't good. The first half of the Rams game, 49ers were moving the ball well, but they obviously stalled late in that game. Patriots game, they put up 30, but I guess they had some explosiveness there with Jawan Jennings downfield. I think that was Ayuk's biggest game. Arizona game, they didn't score a point in the second half. Seattle, they scored 36. So I think that you could look at that as an example of what to replicate. They did have some of the explosives, some of the easy plays that they need. Kansas City, that was ugly. Dallas, they put up 30, but it wasn't pretty. And now we look at Tampa Bay and Seattle. Those are both games where the 49ers had to go on tightrope backs just to execute the offense, and that's just not going to be sustainable for the 49ers. So rediscover the fastball that allows for easier offensive cohesion. Those of you just joining the 49ers update, Bosa and Purdy, both on the injury list for Shanahan today, but Purdy is a sore shoulder that came from some contact in the game, didn't come from him throwing the football. That'd be much more alarming. He's day-to-day, so I wouldn't worry too far about that. And Nick Bosa, they're going to evaluate him as this week progresses. There is a chance that he'll play Sunday. Charvarius Ward is back in the building. George Kittle expected to return to practice on Wednesday. I think a very good chance that he plays against the Packers, where the 49ers are 1.5-point underdogs. And I did mention that Charvarius Ward has rejoined the team. We take a quick look at the 49ers depth chart here as well. Just get this up on the screen for everybody. And that will be the extent of our update. Maybe I get to some questions. Maybe I don't. That so far is TBD. But here we go with the 49ers depth chart. So we'll shade Purdy in the injury shading, but again, don't be alarmed there. That's shoulder soreness. We can take Trent Williams off of it. He was able to muscle through and play for San Francisco. One thing, Jordan Mason up here, he had only 2 carries yesterday. I thought Jordan Mason looked really fresh. It has been nearly a month since Jordan Mason touched the ball more than 6 times in a game. So I think Mason definitely was getting worn down early this season just because he was at 20 touches a game. That's the highest ever for Jordan Mason. But at this point, he is much fresher. And I would also recommend that Shanahan give him the ball a few more times based on how spry he looked on his 2 carries. 2 carries, 13 yards in the first half. I think Christian McCaffrey has looked fine. Again, I really believe that this is a schematic issue, that the 49ers aren't passing the ball well enough to set up the run. But there should be some room for Jordan Mason and fresh legs to enter this game. Maybe there would have been more had San Francisco had an actual lead down the stretch, and then you let Jordan Mason try to really salt it away. But it was so narrow there at the end for the 49ers. There's only a 1-score lead. They wanted to keep their best guys on the field. I understand that Christian McCaffrey is significantly more threatening than Jordan Mason in all phases of the game, so they didn't get him in there. But it does seem that the 49ers have an asset here who they're not fully using, especially since it's been nearly a month since he last had over 6 carries in a game. All right, back to the depth chart here. Offensive line, defensive line, we got Nick Bosa shaded in pink. We'll see if Kevin Givens returns for the 49ers this week. Charvarius Ward is back with the team, so we can remove him from the injury list. And up here, Jacob Cowing has entered the protocol this week, so we'll also denote the Jacob Cowing injury for the 49ers. That is about the extent of it, though, for San Francisco. As you can see, that's what the roster looks like. Dre Greenlaw is expected to return for the 49ers to practice next week. All right, everybody, thanks for watching. That's your 49ers update. We will talk to you soon.